Good morning, Chair Arroyo. It's a pleasure to see you again. And
Okay, so pull the mic closer,
Sure.
speak into the mic.
Yep.
Otherwise, they yell at us
Oh,
because
don't want that.
they're taping
All
us.
right. How's that for? All right. So, good morning, Chair Committee on Community Development. My name is Miquela Craytor. I'm the Director of New York City Industrial and Income Mobility Initiatives at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And together with Gregg, the Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business, I'm pleased about worker cooperatives and a workforce model deserving of further consideration by the city as we begin to address income inequality in New York City under the Mayor de Blasio's leadership. Both I and Gregg will be happy to take questions. Income inequality is a critical concern for all New Yorkers, and Mayor de Blasio has made clear that tackling this important issue will be a central tenet of this administration. Currently, 30% low income with limited opportunities to increase their economic potential. New York City EDC is working to start developing new strategies for strengthening the economic base in distressed neighborhoods and communities across through fostering entrepreneurial opportunities and supporting organizations and businesses that provide support and employment opportunities to the city's low-income populations. Ultimately, the goal is to help employers invest in their workers and develop mobility for all workers across the city. In January of this year, the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agents own cooperatives in New York City and the potential opportunities cooperatives may provide as a tool for addressing it. The report argues that cooperatives can be formed with workers in any industry, but accrue particular benefits to wage industries by empowering workers to exercise democratic control of their businesses, including wage and profit. This in turn can potentially lead to greater financial stability and wealth accumulation for participating workers. Cooperatives often represent two groups, which New York City EDC and SBS and the city has long small businesses and entrepreneurs. We believe these two groups are unique in their position to help continue to create jobs in the city's workforce landscape as the city's economy continues to recover. Individuals who are often in need of additional financial and technical resources. It is our understanding that we face many of the same issues encountered by all New York City small businesses, including finding funding, affordable space, and technical assistance needs. As the report states, worker cooperatives are not a well-known business with 23 cooperatives throughout the 5 boroughs. However, the report suggests that existing cooperatives can serve as a model for supporting small business growth in the city. The report outlines supportive services that can help work the initial hurdles inherent in the cooperative formation process. These include legal and technical assistance and a worker cooperative movement and a community to draw on experiential advice and institutional support. At Business Solution Services, they meet with entrepreneurs seeking to establish new businesses on a regular basis. This process usually involves consideration of business structure, including sole proprietorship, partnership, and incorporating. SBS will be able to incorporate cooperative structure and refer interested individuals to these organizations that offer step-by-step information corporations on how to do business with the city, as well as determining what agencies purchase the goods and services. In addition, SBS can also provide information on certifying as an MWBE, where cooperatives are eligible for many New York City EDC's industry transformation programs, as well as some capital funds. Cooperative corporations that otherwise meet the requirements as specified in New York City's EDC's to respond to opportunities for capital funding, provided that the cooperative corporation is a legal entity that owns being acquired, constructed, and or approved. In terms of this committee should consider, both New York City and EDC are open to exploring and learning about how new and innovative strategies for addressing income inequality and workforce development issues in New York City. The report potential strategies for recognizing and engaging with worker cooperatives. We believe worker cooperatives warrant further consideration to determine what forms of technical assistance or support the city can provide to groups interested in cooperatives. Based on our experience in assisting businesses to grow and create jobs in New York City, we believe there are still some key questions that need to be answered about the worker cooperative model, including what does the worker cooperative interest among would-be worker owners and potential industries for growth? Are there opportunities including employee ownership and community wealth building of the worker cooperative model to other existing businesses and worker cooperative businesses? The FPWA report cites two current factors standing of worker cooperatives: the limited number of worker cooperatives in New York City and the lack of centralized worker cooperative association. We're open to engaging with these existing organizations, including those offering institutional and technical informing cooperatives, in order to learn more and further discuss these capacity and community issues. Council has shown support for the worker cooperative model in the past by providing grant support to the Center for Family Life training program. We would be interested in hearing more about the results of their program and any potential future efforts in partnership with CFL. In conclusion, thank you again for letting me speak today and giving us to discuss the benefits of the worker cooperative model, which may provide an exciting and innovative way to address income inequality and the issues that these organizations and businesses face. Thanks.
Thank you. The noise you hear in the background is an interpreter happening simultaneously, so try not to get distracted. It might, so that's what's going on, and that's why the sergeant's not telling her to. And thank you for being here. I have a couple of questions. I'll turn it over to my colleagues, and then I'll come back. There are a couple of that I'll go to specifically.
Sure.
On page 3, the incubation and the startup of such an endeavor is usually confronted with challenges and access to resources. That if we take a group of individuals who have a particular skill that they want to develop into a cooperative, low means, credit ratings might be that a bit of a challenge. Reference worker cooperatives are eligible for many EDC programs.
Right.
The requirements specified in the RFPs usually would be a serious barrier for individuals who are startups to be able to qualify. Owning the property to be eligible for capital is also a challenge. Are there any other ways that EDC is helpful or can be helpful in incubation and just assistance business development strategies?
Sure. Through our existing programs where we specifically help startups, the or maybe not so obviously, but now very obviously not geared to startups. So your point is very, so in the case of startups and sort of the support that EDC offers for newer businesses, you will, we have a number of different co-working spaces. Now that is not necessarily the best model for a cooperative, and depending on what the cooperative is structured. So, if, obviously if it's 30 people, if the co-working space doesn't or have enough room for 30 individuals, that may not be the best match. The other thing, as mentioned earlier, a lot of different type of sectors that cooperatives currently operate from. We're aware the report outlines 23 different kinds in New York City. I'm aware of a handful off the top of my head, including house daycare services and healthcare services. Those are types of places where perhaps they don't location as some of our other resources, and therefore they'll probably need a different type of co-working space has available. Our co-working spaces have been normally geared toward more the tech or food needs. And in that respect, if it was a food cooperative, worker-owned cooperative, the food incubators would. So it really depends on the sector, and this goes back to one of the other comments I said, is that we're very interested in learning what we can then try to connect the dots between those niches into what EDC currently has, and then expand have in order to fill the gap. In terms of financing and things along those lines, we work closely with businesses, and worker cooperatives would qualify as well in terms of connecting them to resources. The challenge goes into, I think, the ownership model, and I think this was somewhat raised in the report, but it's certainly something that we've discussed internally. There's a lot of challenges when you're talking a sort of a paradigm shift, and some of our existing who administer loan programs and whatnot, this model is not something they're as familiar with. So under consideration as we look to start any new loan program, much less take into account working with our existing.
I could also, we recently met with the FPWA and
Gregg, your name.
Bishop, Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Small Business Services, and one of the things that we can do immediately with major banks and alternative lenders, and Miquela is correct, some of our major banks may not understand the worker cooperative model, but we do understand that there are financing companies out there, vehicles that are focused on worker to get those companies into our network, and also introduce the worker cooperative model in business basic courses. So we have a series of courses for entrepreneurs who are just starting to think. We have in the past covered the different types of structure: limited liability, sole proprietor, S corp, and worker cooperative was never part of our curriculum. So we are able to add that really quickly. Pathway from education to actually getting in front of someone who, in terms of add the worker cooperative steps into our curriculum. And we also want to work closely with that do provide really good technical assistance to individuals who are interested in actually starting a worker.
Is the FPWA report the only one that we have to look at recommendations and ideas about what cooperative where they have not been successful?
In terms of what's been brought to our attention, that has been the main source of information. That being said, we've at EDC we've had an opportunity to meet on a number of different occasions, and through those interactions we've learned a great deal in terms of the challenges and barriers confronting these organizations, this type of structure, employee-owned structure up. And so in that regard, it's more perhaps anecdotal, but still very informative in terms of how we're sort of taking this information into account when we reflect on our programs.
Now, the fact that we have an interpreter here today,
Yep.
I think is very telling that probably looking at a population of individuals where language access can be a hindrance and a barrier to knock on your door and get some assistance so how do you organize the service and connecting the dots for individuals that are not English proficient?
So I think outside of this issue, we have been tasked with how can we get the word out about our services to the immigrant population. So separate to this, we actually are in the process of a new initiative where we are taking our top 10 courses that I referred to and working with community partners in a way where they will provide those services, whether it's a classroom, workshop, et cetera, not only have the materials translated in New York City, but also have the material presented in the language of right now in the process of identifying organizations, and actually we just completed translating of the materials. So we will be able to reach out to a significant population in New York City, that they are comfortable with.
What languages?
So the top, you're going to quiz me now. So the top 7 are actually
Better know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Then
so
we'll have a different conversation.
It's Haitian Creole, Korean, Chinese, Spanish, Russian, and did I say Korean?
Yeah.
Then I said Korean already. Then it's Korean, Chinese.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I won't give you a hard time, I promise. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, and then we'll come. Crowley, followed by Councilmember King, and then Rosenthal.
Thank you. First, the administration wants to make the city more equitable, and I understand that. I support the idea of worker cooperatives. I have a little history. I know how Rock started worker education and how that is a successful model. It took a long incubation process and a bunch of employees to make that happen. But I know that this is a good model. I'm just curious with the new administration how it's going to be different with funding and resources compared to the administration for these types of worker cooperative programs.
So I a number of different things. I think this administration is reflecting on existing programs and retooling them, and perhaps scrapping some and adding others. So I can't say specifically how that will change resources in very specific terms, but I know that we are taking a very hard look with a clear directive and again take out or add in what is necessary to be providing the type of service quality issues across our city.
If we look at other cities, you mentioned we had 23 cooperatives. Is there a city that we could look to for guidance in the country that has more and that makes them more successful?
So I'm not familiar if you want to.
Related to our briefing, San Francisco is one of the cities that we were told. Also, there are worker cooperatives in Chicago. So, again, there's a lot of information which was in the testimony in terms of, for us in New York City, what particular sector for us to sort of push a lot of the resources in. Clearly, the service sector seems to be one of the areas. We talked a little bit about construction. But again, we're sort of in the beginning of this conversation, but we are willing to see what other cities are doing and what we can replicate.
And does that include a field trip to San Francisco?
I would love if you can get
But look at in how, I say that not in a joking way.
Right.
How do you determine whether another city's model is one that we would be interested in adopting and for business-minded individuals in our city to take a look at the wheel and modeling what they want to do.
I mean, that's certainly
San
something,
Francisco.
right? And that's something, as Gregg mentioned, we've recently, both our agencies have been, at least at EDC, we often do is take a hard look at different, models across the country and sometimes think about other initiatives that we can pilot here through New York City EDC's programs as a way. So that will be part of that process.
I'm sorry, Councilmember, proceed.
Just in wrapping, I would like to see some type of dedicated funding stream specifically for worker cooperatives that the city is willing to put forth. So maybe something similar, of course not the size of a business improvement, but they're legal, so that we could really have the foundation for these companies to grow. And so I think that there needs to be some type of specific allocation for funding for these programs. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember King?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm excited to sit on this committee with you and watch you lead us through take us through the lilies and all this other good stuff.
Don't
¿Cómo
get
está,
confused.
amigas? That's all the Spanish I know.
Andy, understand that this is something we'll do together, so I'm not leading anything, okay?
Well, I love you. Thank you for allowing me to have a seat at the table then. But I want to say thank you for your testimony this morning. And really, I just have one question. When it comes to these worker cooperatives that have been around, and I appreciate, the information I learned this morning, but for you all, even though this is a new administration, so what I like to know over the past, how long have you known about worker cooperatives? And do you really support them? And what have you done to really support them, build them, and encourage more cooperatives to be? Because we're talking about only 20. Been familiar with this. What investments have you actually done from whether it's last administration or what you're looking forward to do moving forward?
So I can give you a few highlights, and then I'll turn it over to Gregg. Sure. So at New York City EDC, I can say that we've known about them for at least, well over 5 years at a minimum, and I've only been with EDC for the last 2.5, so I actually sat in on a meeting in my former world when we briefed EDC on worker-owned cooperatives in a joint effort to get additional support for alternative ways for EDC to invest its dollars. So I'm familiar with that briefing, so I know at least I can go back to 5 years ago that they knew about it. So in that regard, I think one of the key aspects I want to just highlight at one first. New York City EDC's primary mandate over the past, and its management of New York City properties, including the markets in Hunts Point and Bush and Bat in Sunset Park area, and other properties across the 5 boroughs. That has been corporation in the last, I would say, five-ish years. We actually expanded a new division of EDC to address some of the things that our land use transactions weren't touching, and it was in that forum that the worker-owned cooperatives. I'm not sure why that conversation didn't quite translate to funding or abuse at the time, but I can honestly say that it has reached our attention, and through the more briefed with more formal projects who have applied in some of our formal processes and have realized they didn't move forward necessarily in one case, but there are still opportunities where they are applying to programs that we have where they can fit. And I think that's the key part, is that EDC typically has not offered resources, RFPs, really the right fit for what a worker cooperative model or a group that's trying to build that ecosystem would qualify. I'm familiar with other departments of, agencies within the administration in the former who did give support and some attention to this model. So while I can't speak specifically that EDC resourcing it in a formalized way, I know that another agency has done so. One of the groups in Sunset Park was a model that they referred to and highlighted and made sure that it was on our radar. So I hope I answered your question, but yes and no.
I think on SPS side, we've been sort of on the peripheral familiar with cooperatives. opportunities that we have now is actually to bring the cooperative model sort of front and center in terms of for someone who may be chronically unemployed. There's actually, it's a pretty exciting be on our workforce side for when individuals who are coming in looking for job opportunity that they might consider is to go into business with other folks who have similar skill sets. That's something, and I think we have an opportunity to do so. We also, when I first started with SBS, I was a certification program, and we did have a cooperative apply for certification. One of the represented a challenge was because the program requires 51% ownership. There is no 51% across multiple employees, which would then require every single employee to turn over the documents necessary for certification. So that was one of my first experience with a cooperative and some of the challenges with actually accessing government programs. Looking forward to working with organizations that work with cooperatives, one, to educate them about how to is available, whether it makes sense for them to actually focus on selling to New York City, as we can help them do that, and how we can provide the technical assistance as we normally do for other businesses to ease the burden of actually accessing some of these programs.
Okay, thank you. I know I said that one question. I'm just going to follow up quickly.
But I want to follow
okay,
up on so the programs require 51% ownership. In a worker cooperative, that model may not necessarily be true. How do we need to evaluate requirements to see how we can soften or make them a little bit more fluid, a different category?
Right, I mean, and that's definitely worth a conversation with the city law in terms of, the minority and women has to be in control of the program, and a cooperative, it's 51%. And one of the challenges was really, and I see it with small businesses, is some of the documentation required, an individual either may not feel comfortable turning it over to government, or they may not have actually access to those documents. Assistance, so cooperative owners actually understand what we will need as documentation, pathway we can take. We could also take a look at for cooperatives whether or not the eligibility requirement. That's another angle we can take, and certainly helping cooperatives, because you don't need to be certified in order to become a understand how the city buys, where the city buys, and we offer a selling to government class. Matter of just taking some of the services we have, customizing it for cooperatives to help them down that path.
Okay. The ongoing conversation about those nuances,
Sure.
Because those are the things that often a group's ability to move forward with the full implementation of a cooperative often present barriers for
Sure.
them to be able to move forward. And city to be their only customer, we want them to be able to create a business that goods and services throughout,
Yep.
not just government. So we first of an ongoing conversation, and I look forward to the ongoing dialogue. And for the public advocates, you will be part of that conversation. So this is not ending today. You be ready to work, because it generates work, and I expect and hope that you will dialogue and conversation. It's the only way we create something that makes sense and works for everyone. So thank you. I really appreciate that clarity.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Councilman.
And in conclusion, similar to what I'm hoping that this conversation is one that's true and genuine. I know people are still getting their but in the essence of being true to this cause here, I'm asking you all, this administration, a priority, And that means when you make it a priority, you find the resources, you make sure you spend the energy in it. This administration is talking about municipal IDs so people can open bank accounts. Then they need to have jobs so they can put money in these bank accounts. One way to get it done without relying on the system to take care of them. And I say to all of you, stay strong. Okay? All right. Thank you again for your testimony today.
Councilmember Rosenthal.
Thank you for convening this hearing on this topic. What a great way to start off the year. I'm really excited to participate in learning about worker cooperatives and see what I can do. So both of my questions, I'm a little bit wearing my hat as being chair of contracts. Try to figure out a way to be helpful there as well. I guess my first question is about loans, bank loans or city no-interest loans that worker cooperatives going forward. You know, people have written about in $40 million loan program. As you probably know, for city not-for-profits that don't get their city funds in time, there is a revolving loan program that's administered by the Fund for the City of New York that gives loans at a 0%. And this is something that is a very exciting loan program that should have access to. So I guess around that issue, if you guys, I'm wondering if you guys would, you know, I see there are lots of different criteria, there are different sectors, there are different sizes, risk factors, history, but have you at all explored some sort of loan program for worker cooperatives?
Currently, we have not in a specific way. I mean, the loan programs that we currently offer, they are structured or sort of initiated is through an understanding that there's a need in the marketplace. You know, forums like this would be that type of, you know, place to learn these things. We then do a short analysis as to what is currently available in it, and then we traditionally identify resources internally at EDC, get the permission to procured RFP to identify an administrator. EDC doesn't actually give out work with a competitive process to find a group that's qualified, that is interested in behalf. And sometimes we're able to leverage the city dollars with another outside entity, as it was the case in our current food fund, food manufacturing and beverage fund, as well as during the post-Sandy situation where we leveraged city dollars with Goldman and a number of other institutions. So in that regard, no, but we're open.
I guess I'd ask you to look into the possibility of so separate from a grant program,
Right.
some sort of revolving loan
Right.
program. And then secondly, just in terms of if anyone has guidance about language we could use in interested in learning more, I would love to see that there be requirements, that the city have requirements for a certain percentage or a goal in terms of worker cooperation, and apart from the MWBE target.
Yep.
A new category. Why not? So we can expand opportunity.
I think they like it, all the heads are bobbing up in there.
I think and we'd be more than happy to sit down and figure out. The city also has the Emerging Business Enterprise Program, EBE program, that's been underutilized. That may be a perfect fit for this. Instead of creating a new category, that's a flat, it's race and gender neutral, it's a flat percentage so maybe because, you know, in terms of creating new vehicles, you know, the legislation required, maybe and modify it to fit this group
Are you
might
kidding?
be.
A new council, new person? I want to put my stamp on it. Look forward to learning more about that.
Okay.
We'll submit
No
the
problem.
LS request after
I'm
we
out the
leave
door.
here. Thank you, Councilmember. Any other okay. On the ED handout loans, what are the qualifications for an entity to be an administrator? Nonprofit organizations, do they have to be some kind of development type corporate? What do they require?
In
What do you
terms of being
require?
the loan administrator?
Yes.
So we require a number of things, namely that you have expertise in lending out money and that your financial fiduciary, expertise is such that you could be qualified to manage that. It's not prescriptive in terms of whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. It's pretty much neutral on that matter. It's more a matter of whether or not you have the experience and expertise to lend out money, manage the loan program.
So let me use an example.
Yep.
Because one of the questions is, should we nurture the worker cooperative?
Right.
And my thought, only because this question, I have a relation. The Ghetto Film School
Right.
is a nonprofit organization that trains individuals in the technique of filmmaking, and it walks them through all of the components of putting a film together on screen. I can see the Ghetto Film School serving for a film making cooperative
Right.
company.
Right.
To, as a nonprofit organization, fit that administrator type
Necessarily to
Okay.
hand out loans.
loans. Okay.
They could be partnered with someone who has that type of a bank or a credit union or something like that then could partner to do loans specifically cooperatives that might spring out of that school. But in the case, largely what we look for is somebody who can meet the community, whatever community we define. And sometimes
And
they
by
will...
community, you mean what, industry or
Industry,
the work that's
yeah. One I'm most familiar with is our Food and Beverage Manufacturing Fund. In that regard, we partnered with a group called New York's NYBDC, and they manage a number of different other types of loan products out there. But this particular food and beverage manufacturers across the city, one thing that's unique about it is that they chose to partner with an that is very familiar with that community, and they've done additional outreach on behalf of the fund. So it is very possible that if we created such a fund that they would work with a group that's very in touch with the worker-owned cooperative.
Now, as a follow-up, is there any particular industry that you think is primed to have a very aggressive cooperative model developed and move to success? Anything is possible.
I think anything is possible. Again, what we learned in the report and what we've heard through other conversations, a handful of different niches. We don't have, say, 10 worker-owned cooperatives in a very large one right now that operates in that space. But there's
the one in Harlem.
I think it's actually based in the Home health,
yeah.
right. I think it's a couple thousand members.
Yes, yes.
But the average is far south of that. So I think what we've learned, just again, because the numbers are not significant at this point, is we've learned some great lessons, but the question is, what is the right level of resources? Does it need broadly spread? Do we need to double down perhaps on only specific sectors? And that's the sort of, I think, research that we need to do still to understand how do we tailor our resources? Is it a matter of just modifying what customizing it through language and sort of cultural sensitivity and all the other things to get sort of the heart of the meeting where people are at, so that our programs and existing curriculum are relevant to that structure, or reinvent start all over and add completely new offerings into what we typically do provide.
It's a relatively new venture for us as a city to invest
Yes.
in propping up companies that long-term can be sustainable on their own. Short-term assistance that we can provide to incubate the business and then cut them loose, graduate them, and then they go into freestanding operation. Do you have any thoughts about what we can do jointly? Because I have an idea about how our work here can advance dollars and cents are at the center of that conversation. That you need support in building up, or do you have to go back and rethink everything that we have available? With minor tweaking, we can invest a little bit more. At this point, how ready are you to make a recommendation to us about what we should be doing?
So I'll start with this one. I think the good news is that we do have an infrastructure in terms of, because at the end of the day, this is a business, and at the end of the day, what I see with small businesses, we need to provide them with support for technical assistance. So back end, how to run a business, back end office support. We need to provide them a capital. SBS, we have a network of lenders, like I said. Last year we did about $44 million in terms of referrals, and one of the things that we're successful at is understanding when someone comes into our NYC Business Solutions Centers, which lender will be the best fit for them. So we can use the NYC Business Solutions infrastructure to make sure that we train ourselves to understand if someone actually wants to start a cooperative, well, what's the cooperative financial landscape in terms of lenders that's able to actually understand the nuances with a cooperative. So there's a couple, I think, low-hanging fruit for us to actually understand and help the new ventures start. I think some of the longer term or mid to longer term, helping with procurement, because any business, when we first meet with a business, we ask them, are you ready to do business with the city? It doesn't really matter what the model is. They just need to have the capacity. We have a program on the MWBE side called Compete to Win, where we've invested a lot of money, about $1 million, in helping businesses with technical assistance for bid and how to respond to bid documents. We review those documents. We have a construction mentorship program to help them understand that industry. We have a bonding program to help them get bonded. So some of those things are going to be necessary no matter what your structure is. Some of that infrastructure that we have and add into cooperative, I think is an easy thing for us to do.
And then how quickly we pay for the services we buy as a city, because I think one of the companies often face in doing business with the city is that they have to wait an amount of time to be paid for the work that they're providing. And when we're looking at startups, the floating, whatever they have to pay, major problem, and it could potentially make the difference between success and failure of
Sure.
its customers.
Yeah, and we touch on that when in our Sell into Government class. We're trying to do and work with different agencies to figure out how to speed up that payment process. But you are correct. It is in some cases, I hate to say this, the city has bankrupt companies because they just couldn't.
We don't want to do that,
Right,
and I think
exactly.
that we have so many smart people like you.
Yep.
Both of you.
Well, thank you.
In city government. That with the most profound respect, because I am a deep believer in that the people that we have working in the agencies here centrally at the city council, at the city agencies, are really incredibly committed individuals that, given the bureaucracy, they would. And I don't know that we've ever really looked at what layers in the bureaucracy. And we've done some work to facilitate over the last 6 or 7 years, but to make me as a small business, cooperative, or waiting to be paid by the city, whether I live or die as a business. It's just something that
Oh.
my glass is half full. I think we have the smarts to be able to clear up some way of people
Sure.
being paid on time.
Yep.
So
I was just going to briefly add to what Greg shared in terms of, I think there's low-hanging fruit that both of our agencies, among frankly across the city as a whole, could be doing to modify and sort of retweak existing resources, programs, communications, so that relevant to all businesses, shapes, and sizes, no matter what your legal structure is. And make sure that we work with our existing partners so that they're also sensitive and comfortable and familiar with these alternative means of existing businesses. I think to your point, though, about the challenges befalling small businesses, and I think it also applies to cooperatives, there is a large burden that is upon anyone who takes the leap of faith to start something. City can do a lot more, and we're excited because under this administration there's a lot of rethinking about that in terms of how to people who have an idea and a dream to start their own business, and what is a way to we can ensure their success and make them more sustainable. Thank you for giving us the faith of your support, and I do know that there's a lot of folks with good ideas that are excited to start.
I am really looking forward to the work that we're going to do around this issue moving forward. I think it provides the city an excellent individuals who are smart and industrious, but have in their life but for some support, guidance in a process, which is where I hope to create a level of opportunity to handhold a cooperative, and they graduate and move on, and success is more assured than if they were out there just spinning their wheels. We're going to be engaged in this conversation over the next couple of months to help us figure out what is it, or the last question, what are some of the ways that the council can assist in developing through this process, and help the mayor achieve his addressing equality and poverty in communities that are we just want an opportunity, and I think that we can create that opportunity working together.
Sure.
I ask that the administration remain in the room for the public testimony. Once in the city council is that when you sit here, you say one thing, and then when they come up, they say something completely contrary to what you have testified to, and we need to be able to bridge the gap of information that sometimes. Very much. I look forward to working with you on this very exciting topic. Okay, we are going to call up our first public panel. And at this point, we're going to start using the clock because I think we have a great deal more individuals to testify than we anticipated, and we want to get to everyone. So we will use the clock. I mean, no disrespect, please. Understand that. Okay, we have Noah Franklin, Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies. Noah, that's you? Okay. Christopher Michael, New York City Network of Worker Cooperatives. Christopher? His head is almost going to fall off. Omar? Omar, and I butcher your last name. Freila?
Yes.
Freya. It's Spanish. The double L is a J. Okay. Cooperatives.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Mike, and people think I'm the boss, that we're not going to apply the 3-minute clock, but we will, after this panel, begin the clock. So, gentlemen, when you're ready, I don't know, draw straws. State your name for the record. When you begin, the sergeants get annoyed. Okay.
Good morning, Chairman Arroyo, distinguished